This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
When you are outside of the box, it is hard to gauge how far away you may be. A break in the established norm is a foreign landscape that is unknown and very scary. There is no measurement or quantifiable structure of results. There will be a fair share of doubters and detractors. Those resilient enough to take on that charge are open to crushing criticism. Where you see potential, others may see disaster. You're taking a huge gamble by thinking differently. A simple roll of the dice could build your fortune or put you in ruin. But undoubtedly, the biggest risks produce the biggest rewards. I'm Kevin Donaldson, always here with Mike Falaise, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and now you can join. And of course, follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. On this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome back a guest long time ago, episode 42, at Blue Magazine's mental health retreat, way up in God's country somewhere.
Right.
Mike and I go up there, and we were invited by Danny Delval, and he introduced me to this therapist, Anna Pais, who's sitting in front of me right now. And I was like, I got to talk to you. I got to talk to you because you're here for a reason. I appreciate you coming back. I appreciate you for what you do, and you have no idea how often your name is given out by me.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm happy to be back.
Because we got a lot to talk about tonight, because we're going to talk about some chicken voodoo.
Yep.
But before we do, let's give a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. Now, we don't trust anybody as retired police. We also don't trust anybody as podcasters, but we do trust the boys over at Toyota Hackensack. So when you're looking for a car, go to toyotahackensack.com and they'll find you a car. So, Anna, I can't remember if we did this the first time you were in, but we do take a question from our audience every week. This question comes from Tenny Delicious. What motivates or inspires you? You know, I think a lot of times, and especially doing what you do in your therapy practice, you get derailed every once in a while, and then something always has to bring you back. Something has to motivate you or inspire you. So what's that for you?
Gosh, for me, it's my family. That's a no-brainer. I have 2 little ones at home, and I want to be able to set the best example for them. I want them to be proud of their mom and the work that she's doing. And so for me, I always have them in the back of my mind as a way to ground me. And not just my kids, but also my husband, who's extremely supportive, and I really could not.
And he's also a police officer.
And he is also a police officer. And so I could not be where I am today without the 3 of them. So.
How old are your kids?
I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Yeah, if a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old doesn't ground you, I don't think you're able to be grounded.
Right.
They will definitely. It's like you just saved somebody's life. Hey, Mom, I just did this in the bathroom, and I need you to come help me clean it up.
Totally.
It's like, okay.
Story of my life, right?
So, doing this podcast, doing all these episodes, and speaking to people throughout the country, you know, I'll get messages on social media, and they'll say, they'll just reach out, and they know that I come from a place of understanding. And I will give them the best suggestion I have. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not classically trained in any type of therapy, but I do have 2 ears to listen.
Sure.
So that's what I'll do. I'll listen to them. That's not what inspires me or motivates me. What inspires me or motivates me is when I get that call 4 months in the future, or a year in the future, 2 years in the future, and they'll say, you know, I was thinking about you the other day because when you took time to listen to me, it really made a difference. You know, I heard this thing before that most people in their times of crisis, I think it was Simon Sinek, who I like listening to him, some of the things he says. He says most people in the worst of the worst times just need 8 minutes of your time. They just need 8 minutes, and it'll get them over that little sticky spot.
Sure.
So if I can provide that for somebody, what's 8 minutes? I'll tell my wife, hey, listen, just give me 8 minutes. Or, everybody has 8 minutes to spare.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I get that call in the future to say, hey, you don't know what that meant to me. You don't know how much I appreciated that. Now all of a sudden, when you might be a little bit, might go off on a little tangent in life, that just brings me right back anyway. And know that all this hard work is not in vain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Tenny Delicious, thank you for sending that question, and keep sending in your questions and we will try to get them on the air. So, I don't know if I ever asked you this the first time. How did you end up at that mental health retreat that long ago in September of 2001?
In 2020 is when I opened up my private practice. It's when I decided to leave agency work and really dive into, private practice. And in that, running a business, you just have to network, right? And so it just really came from networking and then connecting with Danny. And he had asked me to speak at one of the Moment of Silence events, and I spoke there. And then he reached back out to me again and was like, hey, we're having this like camping trip. We'd love for you to be there. Can you be there? I'm like, sure, I'm there, right? And I think at some point then he's like, hey, we're having a podcast happening. Would you be open to that? I'm like, sure, why not, right? What's the harm? And
Yeah, there was no hiding that day. We were
No.
up. Let me just set the stage. There's pictures of it.
Yes.
There's pictures of it out there. We were on the back of a flatbed, a big flatbed. So it was like a stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a huge American flag in the background. And Mike and I we're trying to set up all our stuff. We weren't really mobile. We were packing stuff up, trying to do what's right. As a matter of fact, we had a table. Mike went out to a local Kmart or a local Walmart or something and bought a tablecloth. So it looked somewhat professional, but we were only on audio, so it didn't make a difference. Yeah. And we had you up there. And the reason that you were so important to us is because you were doing what we're advocating for, which is the first responder world, the police officers world in particular, to try to avoid some of the pitfalls that him and I had gone through.
Right.
And it was really important for us to sit down and to talk to you and find out, your mission, your take on it. It was really the start, that day was really the start of broadening our horizons and really say, okay, we can actually make a difference here by leading people to these professionals who are dedicated and who understand police officers.
Right. We're here, right? Because I think sometimes the fear is they're not going to understand, or the fear is I don't want to traumatize this person with my stories. I barely share it with my own family. And so I think that hinders, right? And then obviously the fear factor of like confidentiality. Is this going to get back to my department? Is this professional going to say, you gotta hang up your gun, whatever. And that just paralyzes people, right? And so to let people know, hey, there are professionals out there. They understand the culture. They understand the confidentiality issues. They can put you at ease. It's like they say, build it and they'll come. But if they don't know that you're even there.
But you have an advantage, all right? You're married to a police officer. So if you don't, well, I can't say any spouse really understands their spouse, but you have an advantage where you have a vested interest.
Sure.
Because of the life that you live. You know the stresses of the person at home. The person at home, I've said this for years, that is the unsung hero, because you didn't sign up for the work that your husband does.
Right.
But yet you have to deal with many of the stresses, the untold stresses, and just say, hey, have a good day at work, when it's more than likely not going to be a good day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And we don't know, it's like, all right, we're sending you off, and we don't know
there
what
are no
that's
promises.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. And so living with that heaviness of, okay.
But I know if I was coming into you as a first-time patient and I am a police officer, and the moment I hear, well, I'm married to a police officer, gloves get dropped. The gloves get dropped because there's many therapists out there, and I've been to a couple of them who say, oh, yeah, I treat veterans, so I should know how to treat police officers. There's one in particular, and Mike had seen him as well, who almost got thrown out of a third-floor window by me. The worst of the worst times, said some really inflammatory things, and I realized that day he had absolutely no idea how to treat police officers. So thankfully, there are people like you, and since that episode in 42, there's a group of people who I recommend. I said, depending on their location or geographic location, I just sent somebody your way recently. Go see this person, and they know I'm going to send people who know cops, who understand cops. I'm not going to send you to Joe Blow, our mutual friend. Well, she was a former police officer. Of course she's going to understand. Or Dr. Steph, that's all he's done for 40 years. Right. He better understand police officers. It's an invaluable thing to have that resource and that jumping off point. All I am is a conduit. Hey, listen, I've been through it, but these are people who I recommend. Right. So, but in order to get into that line of work, you had to have some sort, like, what did you just jump off into private practice, or did you transition from another job?
Yeah, so I did transition from another job. So when I graduated, I went into doing mental health in state prison and county jails.
Oh, you wanted to fast track on how to unsee every damaged life possible.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of where I got my start was,
you went right from college into these places.
Yep. Yeah.
So you're coming out of college with these idealistic save the world eyes.
Sure.
And you get dropped in the middle of a prison.
Yep.
What was your first eye opener?
For me, it was, there's so much trauma, and I am but one person, and everyone here is traumatized, and I can't even make a dent, right? Not to mention I have but maybe 10 minutes to check in with you and just make sure everything is kosher, copacetic, and on my way, right? So what can I really do in 10 minutes? And it was there that I realized I'm going to get burned out really quick if I keep doing this, because I can't be effective in...
Does anybody stay in that job for a career?
No.
Yeah. No. Because it just seems like you're moving cattle through. It's the same reason why teachers get burnt out and they stop really caring about the lessons they teach. You see it all the time.
Right.
Because it's you can't slow up for the ones who need it, and you can't. There are certain people who are there just to waste a little time, especially in those places. It's freedom for them. So, I don't see. It's like playing dodgeball. Again, you're the only person playing against a team of 50. You're just getting all these dodgeballs thrown at you, and you're deflecting a couple of them. Right. But you can't. You're eventually going to get hit with one.
Yeah, it's really just doing damage control at that point, right? We're not really getting into anything, specific and really helping these individuals, right? Where it's making sure that this person is getting the medication so that they're not disruptive, and it's making sure this person, if they're suicidal, that they are put on a suicide watch, right? But there's no real therapy going on, and I knew that wasn't why I came into this field.
Well, how many people would you be charged to treat on an average?
I would be charged to treat multiple tiers. So
hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yeah. And realistically, from your experience, how many therapists should there be in there treating that many people?
I would have to say it would have to be a team of maybe 50 therapists. I mean, we had 4. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We had 3.
So you had 3
for an entire jail.
And it's, think about the difference that you could make inside that prison if you were properly staffed.
Oh, absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
If I can actually dedicate, 60 minutes, 45 minutes for individual therapy, there could be a huge difference.
And some of these people may be able, there's a litany of things that, you could play the woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Right.
But there's a litany of things that could change with just some focus on true mental health.
Absolutely.
Because for years, mental health has been on the back burner. Now, all of a sudden, it's in the forefront of everything, and everybody's a mental health advocate, and everybody's charging for this cause. It's great,
Yeah.
but we got a lot of catch up.
Right. Yeah.
So you transition. Do you remember the day when it just, I can't do this? Because we've all had those moments where you just, I can't live like this anymore. Do you remember that day?
Yeah. Well, it was during COVID.
Oh, really?
So it was during COVID. At this point, I'd actually transitioned into treating people that were dealing with the terminal illness, but very much a company that was numbers driven. So again,
Like a
we wanted
hospice
to,
type of situation?
Cranky. Not exactly. It was more about helping people advance care plan for when they passed, right? What are their medical wishes, that sort of thing, and helping work through those conversations, but very much, again, numbers driven. And so this is COVID, and I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this like numbers game where it isn't about the person in front of me anymore. It's just how much work can I crank out. And I had always wanted to do private practice work. And it was at that time where I was recognizing just the weight that first responders were experiencing during COVID. As a first responder wife, I knew the worry that I felt at home, and knowing, again, here I am sending out my husband. I don't know what he's going. It was so many unknowns, right? And that's kind of when it hit me. I was like, this is what I want to be doing.
Well, you have some stake in the game.
Sure.
That's the big. Anything you do in life, if it's soulless, if you just do it as a job, you're not going to put your whole heart into it. But if you actually have some stake in the game, all of a sudden you do your job better.
Yeah.
You have some passion. It's that old adage, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And the last job on the planet that should become rote and routine is therapy.
Oh, yeah.
Because then it becomes that proverbial moving the cattle through.
Oh, absolutely.
So you transition, but that had to be a very, very scary transition, because you go from a paycheck to maybe a paycheck.
Yeah. Or none at all.
Or none at all. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely scary.
But you have to set everything up too. So I don't even know what the move is like going from this highly institutionalized world to, I mean, everything. I guess you got to set up, you got to get your LLC, you got to get an office, you got to get this, you got to get that.
Yeah, I became a business owner overnight without knowing nothing about running a business. So I researched the heck out of, like, how do I even create an LLC?
And your husband at this time, how many years did he have on?
Oh gosh.
Did he have at least 10?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So he had at least 10 years on. What's that conversation like? Hun, we got to talk.
Yeah. He was extremely supportive, right? And again,
he's thinking free therapy. That's what he's thinking.
Well, it doesn't really work that way, right? Because I'm not your patient. I'm not your client. I'm like, you're absolutely right.
My wife's a personal trainer, and every once in a while, she'll try to give me training tips, and I'll be like, I'm not your client.
Yeah.
Not your client.
Yeah. So we have to have that very clear boundary, right? Where it's like, you're absolutely right. So here's a couple numbers. Get a calling.
Yeah, but at least you can. So from a distance, you can actually. It's a very valuable asset to have in your marriage, because doing what your husband does, while you can't always tell him what you see, I'm sure you see it. You know, I hate to put your husband up as the crash test dummy, but I'm sure you can see things on him from your experience.
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, and you just keep an eye on it. You keep your eye open, and when it's time to step in and intervene, I guess you can.
Yeah, and you know, I think from being married to me, I think he's kind of picked up on his own stuff, and he recognizes when he might not be doing too hot, right? And kind of dial himself back.
That's like having a spouse that sells firearms. God, what a great asset to have as a police officer. It's valuable.
Yeah.
Because here's what people don't realize about therapy. I just heard this interview with Dana White, and I love Dana White from the UFC. I love him, but he's being interviewed by Bill Maher, and Bill Maher says, "You don't talk about your feelings," and he goes, "No, fuck feelings. No, I'm a man. I got to go do this." And it's the first time that I've listened to Dana White and go, "You don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you don't know what you're talking about. Now, because I talk about my feelings, it takes away none of my masculinity. It takes away none of it. Okay? Right. Because here's my thinking. If you're going to judge me, well, I'll punch you in the face and show you exactly how masculine I am.
Right.
And then I'm still going to talk about my feelings.
Right.
I'm still going to talk about what's bothering me, because burying it deep and keeping it in is the reason why, especially in the police world, reported suicides are high.
Right.
Think about all the unreported suicides.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what helps too.
The key component to any law enforcement officer being the best version of themselves is through education. Sherry Alsop is a leader in providing that education to police agencies, preparing them for the all too frequent dealings with sexual assault victims.
You've seen Sherry on episode 169 of the Suffering Podcast. She survived incest and almost daily sexual assault, so she comes from a place of experience and true understanding.
Sherry has the intelligence, commitment, and compassion to open the eyes of those on the front lines, while providing the tools to effectively deal with a difficult situation. Sherry's instruction comes from experience and multiple certifications.
Training with Sherry will offer on-site training, customized schedules, specialized instruction tailored from a victim's perspective.
You are going to hear Sherry's heart-wrenching but inspiring survivor story. Learn proprietary trauma-informed training techniques, uncovered victim-centered interview methods, while earning continuing education credits according to your state guidelines. To be the best, you must learn from the best. Let Sherry also guide you through the delicate cases of sexual assault from a victim's point of view.
Be a source of comfort to those victims affected by these traumatic experiences while producing a solid investigation and uncovering details that often go unnoticed.
To find out more or to contact Sherry Alsop, go to sherryalsop.com. That's SherryAllsup.com.
Is the work that I did, right? He's like, listen, you worked at a jail, so you kind of know the element that I deal with and the kind, you've heard the stories, right? Because you've worked with these inmates. You've heard some of the stories. You know what they're, for the most part, if they share what they're in for. So I think that also helped him in that I don't have to shield her from the scary, bad world, because she literally was in the middle of it for some time.
Which is huge, because most male cops will go home. How's your day? It's fine. It's good. It's okay. I'm not going to tell you what color the body was that I was just working on, or the car accident where somebody got their leg ripped off.
Right.
Because in my mind, the way I used to think, in my mind, this is not your job. This is my job. It's my burden to bear.
Yeah.
And I think it is so wrong. I think that's the wrong way to approach it as a man. And I can only speak as a man. We're in a new millennium now, so I'm, maybe one day I'll be able to speak as a woman, but for now it's just a man.
Right.
It's such a wrong way to do this. There's a way to approach your wife that maybe you don't have to give her full details. Say, look, I had a really rough call. I'd rather not talk about it right now. At least she knows. At least you give her a heads up.
Absolutely. I mean, it beats just kind of zoning out in front of the TV and your wife then starting to create this narrative and this story about he doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about our family, and, you know, whatever narrative, because that's generally how that starts to go, is right? And they can't read your mind, right? So they don't realize like you've had a really crappy call at work, and that this is the way that right now you are trying to settle your system and deal with it. Instead, they're taking it personal, right? And so then the problems start to happen within the relationship.
So you have an inside view on spouses of police officers, which makes you probably one of the more valuable people I could ever speak with. Because I just had this a couple weeks ago. Officer from South Jersey called me, and the one thing that he's going through he was in a shooting. He's going through all the symptoms. Mm-hmm. And I asked him this question. I said, so how's your wife? How's your wife taking all this? It was the one thing, maybe he could have been lying to me, but it was the one thing where it seemed to be very solid. And I felt really good and confident about that one, because then I know, only suggestion I gave him, I said, don't shield her. Mm-hmm. Don't tell her everything, okay? But don't shield her. Let her know if you're having some moments of trial or moments of doubt, and then just leave it at that.
Right.
And I think I actually gave him your name.
Yeah, and that's just it, right? It's like they're not asking for the details. What they're asking is for connection. Like, tell me you're struggling. That's okay, right? I can't fix it for you, but at the very least, I can sit here with you and help support that, right? And talk about what you're feeling, right? And the story or the details of the incident never really have to come to light. I don't know that spouses are really asking for that. It's just more of like, connect with us rather than, your video game or your TV or the bottle.
Because that all promotes darkness, right? And that's what you're trying to stay away from.
You're isolating.
Yeah, you're isolating. And then the walls close in and you get that peripheral vision just narrows up. And next thing you know, you don't see your kids playing. You don't see your wife trying to talk to you. You just see what's in front of you and this gloom and doom on the side of it. And that's it.
Right.
That's it. It's a horrible place. I was there.
Yeah.
It's a horrible place to be. And my wife, and then what you do here's the side effect of it. So you protecting your wife, and again, I'm talking male police officers who are married to women. Mm-hmm. By you protecting your wife, you're now creating trauma for her, because like you said, she's making up all crazy things. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, he's cheating on me. Oh my God, he doesn't love me anymore. Oh my God, he's disassociating himself. He just doesn't have it anymore. Yeah. She's creating all that stuff. And that uncertainty is creating trauma in your wife. Mm-hmm. My wife has post-traumatic stress, right, undoubtedly, from my mess. Undoubtedly, that I've been trying actively to unwind.
Right.
And that takes years to unwind that stuff. Not only from when I was on the job, but from when my shooting happened.
Right.
And then you're dealing with that. But I'm going to caution every male police officer who's listening. If your wife stays with you, never let her go. Mm-hmm. Because if she's willing to stick with you through your mess, there's some beauty on the other side of that.
Yeah.
And then, so how you came here today is I called up my doctor. And I said, I go out and I'll talk about EMDR, this new form of therapy. Because the traditional protocol when you're in a shooting or in a traumatic incident is SSRI, benzo.
Yep.
Right? I don't know. I hate being medicated. I hate being reliant on a pill. Sure. I believe that the body has a way to naturally heal itself. I'm far from a hippie, but I do believe in holistic healing. Right. And that's what happened to me. When I got put on SSRI, the side effects, not only sexual side effects, but the dullness. Right. And I know it'll dull the amygdala. Mm-hmm. It was horrifying. I hated it. It made a tough situation worse for me.
Okay. Yeah.
Sure, I wasn't impulsive anymore, but I wasn't impulsive about anything.
Right. Okay. So it kind of dimmed the light.
It did, and
Yeah.
I always prided myself on recall. I can
Mhm.
remember names, I can remember dates, I can remember, and all of a sudden I couldn't do that anymore.
Okay.
So I'm already feeling bad about myself because I can't deal with this stress. Now I don't even have that little positive in my personality anymore. That's going away. So now I just feel like I'm dying.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And that's one of the side effects oftentimes of psychiatric medication, right? Is that it could induce more depressive symptoms and suicidal ideation and that sort of thing. Those are definitely things to look out for as a result of being on psychotropic medications. And look, I'm not against them, but I think it needs to be a combination, right? Sometimes you have points in your life where in order to even do the work, we might need a little bit of help from those medications just so that we can start some of that intense work. And then, all right, let's explore weaning off once we're feeling a little bit more regulated, right? Um, but it's these side effects we do have to keep an eye out.
Because for me, the side effects were they far outweighed the benefits.
Yeah.
So the first chance I got, after I retired, and I remember telling myself, I'm done with this. I'm done. So I weaned myself off. I didn't just stop. I was conscious enough to say that I can't just stop them.
Right.
So I weaned myself off, and everything did return.
Yep.
Eventually, thankfully.
Yeah.
And then I just stopped therapy. Like I stopped therapy after about 6 years. So I didn't stop therapy right away, but I stopped therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it was time to go back and get the tune up, I get brought into this room by my doctor, and there's a light bar.
Yep.
And I'm holding 2 joysticks, and I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm going to get raped. No, that's not what I thought. I get brought into this room, and I'm like, what the hell is this? He goes, well, this is EMDR. Now, I had heard of EMDR. Other friends of mine have gone through EMDR, and I don't really know that much about it. So I start doing this, and it's a bunch of flashing lights. I'm going to tell you this from my experience, and then please fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Bunch of flashing lights and different questions.
Yep.
And then it's over.
Yeah.
And you put the joysticks down. I walk out. I'm like, well, that was weird. And I didn't really think anything of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, well, I tried it. Didn't work. It was the weirdest thing. About 2 days later, it was like a therapy grenade because it went off. It was time release.
Yeah.
About 2 days later, I just start thinking of, and it was trauma. I start thinking about some trauma. And before, where I would start thinking about that trauma and I'd get very anxious.
Yeah.
I wasn't getting anxious.
Right.
And I said, a conscious thought was, wow, this is weird.
Yeah.
This is weird. This is like I got a friend of mine that calls it chicken voodoo.
Voodoo.
Yeah, he calls it chicken voodoo.
Right.
And so I went back and I did it again, and it was very similar results, where nothing happens right away. So when I go out and speak, I speak about EMDR and what it did for me.
Right.
Because it enabled me to process trauma and not get anxious about it.
Right.
And most of the country, when I go out, they have no idea what EMDR is. And I explain it to them, and they say the same thing. That's weird.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. So I call up my friend and I say, it's time for us to start talking about EMDR because I think there's a lot of benefit to it. And she says, well, you know what? I like to stay behind the scenes, but let me give you to a friend of mine, Anna Pais. I'm like, well, I happen to know her. So I give you a call, and here you are.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved in EMDR? Let's start there.
Sure. This friend we're speaking of, when I decided again to go into private practice, I'm not going to pretend I know anything about, therapy and the police world. Although I'm married to a police officer, I'm not a police officer. And so I decided I need someone in that world that's doing the work already. And so I reached out to her.
I think we can give her a name.
I mean, that's up to you.
No, it's I don't care. Listen, people know I'm in therapy. I'm messed up. It's Dr. Anastasia Paitel.
Yeah.
I mean, she's aces.
Yeah.
She's wonderful.
Yeah. And so I reached out to Dr. Paitel and I said, I'm a new therapist. I'm looking to enter into this world. This is my passion. I want to work with first responders. Where do I start? Like, what do I need? Right? What kind of trainings do I need? And she's like, go get trained in EMDR. I was like, okay. So I went down the rabbit hole of EMDR and looked it up.
What does EMDR stand for?
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Quite the mouthful. So they shorten it.
They shorten it to EMDR. It sounds good to me.
And so I went and researched and looked up various trainings and landed on a training. The training that I did, which resonated with me, is the SAFE EMDR, which stands for Somatic and Attachment Focused EMDR.
Because you can do EMDR with fingers, right? You can do it with finger movements.
It's the bilateral stimulation, right? So EMDR is really the eye movements are the cornerstone, and it's what people know EMDR by. And so initially we're trained to use our fingers and just do the bilateral movements, but doing that all day, you're going to need shoulder surgery at some point, right? So most of us invest in a light bar. And with the light bar, I think you said you were holding some like joysticks, right? And they buzzed.
Yeah,
probably.
They buzzed, and when they buzz, you got to click them, and
yeah. So there's the buzzing that goes back and forth. So that's another form of bilateral stimulation. And then for some people, they might use sound, so bilateral sound. So there's a variety of ways.
I think I had sound as well.
Okay. Yeah.
I think.
Yep. So it could be one, it could be, both or all three, or it could be either one. And then there's tapping, right? So sometimes if someone is having a big emotional reaction and they can't quite, and this is more virtual when I work with people virtually, and they don't have access to the tappers and they're starting to struggle with the eye movements, then I instruct them to tap, which you can either tap bilaterally on your knees or do what's called the butterfly hug, which kind of giving yourself a hug and then tapping back and forth. So there's a variety of.
Does that have anything to do? Because if you see somebody in recent post-trauma where they'll sit there and they'll rock.
That's their nervous system trying to regulate.
Is that similar to tapping?
It could, yeah, sure, because there's that rhythmic bilateral, but it's really more this like cerebellum rocking that starts to happen. And think about when you're a baby, right?
Yeah.
We soothe
how you
babies by rocking them back and forth, and so we really revert to that more infantile stage, and that's a nervous system that is really working hard to soothe itself.
So somebody once told me that when you experience a reaction or an emotion for the first time, and it's an unfamiliar emotion, you revert to childhood. You always revert back to childhood. So how's a child react when they get a toy taken away? Well, they get angry, they throw a tantrum. How does a child react to pain? They cry. And you revert back to what you know as a child. But with EMDR, and I think like probably fourth or fifth session, something was said, and the tears just opened up. Like I don't know. I'm like, where the hell did this come? I don't even remember what the thought was. Yeah. It just opened up. So what's going on in the brain while this stuff is going on?
Sure. So the understanding is when you go through a traumatic event, right, it gets filed, right? And the problem is that event, because your brain is so overwhelmed, right? So the amygdala is overworked, which is the emotional center of your brain, right? And then you have your hippocampus, which is responsible for memory. And then you have your higher brain, your frontal lobe, that basically kind of makes meaning out of all of this. Well, guess what? The frontal lobe is out of commission. It is not in the building. And right now, during this traumatic event, all that's available is your amygdala that's sounding off the alarm, and this hippocampus that's trying to figure out, why is the amygdala freaking out, right? So if that is not processed properly, and oftentimes it's not because it's overwhelmed, it gets filed fragmentally, and it's almost like it's in the inbox. All right. So now this memory is in the inbox. It doesn't make a lot of sense because it's bits and pieces. I can't quite put this together. And then you go about your day, and something, and sometimes it could be at the cellular level, you don't really know what sets it off, but that inbox message is now right front and center. And you are experiencing that memory as if it was happening right then and there. And so what EMDR is doing, it's allowing you to have one foot in the past, in that memory, and one foot in the here and now where you are safe, right? And it just is allowing the brain to reorganize itself, right? And pull from adaptive information that you have already in your system, and just trying to make sense of this in a way. It just happens so quickly, right? Because again, the eye movements, and it's replicating REM sleep, right? Part of the reason why people tell you when you're having a bad day, go sleep it off, and then you wake up.
Unless you're Italian, then they tell you to go eat.
Or that.
Which I just verified by watching The Godfather. Listen to The Godfather.
Yeah.
That's how they deal with trauma.
Yeah.
So listen to The Godfather. Hey, you don't look well. Why don't you go get yourself something to eat? Hey, you're looking, why don't you go get something to eat? You look tired. Why don't you go get something to eat? I swear to God.
Right.
Swear to God.
Maybe there's something about the chewing mechanism, right? That's allowing things to move around.
But the way I describe it to people, remember 20 years ago when you used to have to defragment the disk on your computer?
Yeah.
You know, and you'd set it, and you'd set it and forget it, and it would run this whole process. It's two pieces of information that need to be together, but one is put in a separate spot, and this disk defragmented. The kids, the Gen Z, are not going to understand this because you don't have to do this anymore.
Right.
What it would do is just take that piece of information and put it back to where it was supposed to.
Yes.
And then it's able to work properly, and it would speed up your computer.
Yep. Same idea.
But my friend Sherry Alsip, when she talks about EMDR, she does this little test, and she talks about how broken a traumatic brain is, and she asks the class. She does. I hate to give this away, but it's a really cool thing, and I want everybody to listen. And I'm going to do this with you because now, do you agree that we're under a calm circumstance? We've been talking enough. You've been in front of a microphone before, so I hope you're not nervous.
Good.
But you've carried around dimes your whole life, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So what she'll do is she'll have somebody give a dime if anybody carries around change anymore. Just turn it upside down. Say, now you've been carrying around a dime for 30 years, for 40 years. Who's on the front of a dime? With your brain, you're with your brain thinking the way that it does.
Yeah.
Who's on the front of a dime? And, anybody who's listening, pause it here, pick up a dime, and try to, without looking at it, without cheating, tell me who's on a dime. Well, what do you mean you can't tell me who's on a dime? You've been carrying around a dime for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. You can't tell me who's what president's on a dime? And it's a really big eye-opener to the way that a traumatic brain is. Now, you're expecting me to give you details, to process stuff with a brain that is not functioning at 100%.
Right.
You know?
Right.
By the way, it's Roosevelt.
Thank you for that.
Okay, it's Roosevelt. The Suffering Podcast welcomes our newest sponsor, Keto Revive. Ketamine infusions that are personalized, accessible, and holistic. Proven treatments for post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, chronic pain, neuropathic pain, and so much more. Keto Revive is physician-operated with customized treatments tailored to you and an outstanding support system. Keto Revive offers first responder special discounts. So try something new. Proven treatments. Located in Wyckoff, New Jersey. To find out more, visit Keto Revive at ketorevive.com. Let's start healing today. I always like that analogy because when your brain experiences trauma, it is not working right.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
That's right.
And I think that's what EMDR did for me. It helped me process things in a way that didn't make my brain worse.
Yeah, it's almost like kind of like below the surface, right? Like things are happening kind of in the background, right? Like you said, it wasn't until a couple days after that something kind of just happened. And when I end EMDR sessions, I oftentimes, pretty much every session, I think some of my clients are like, all right, I already know the spiel. But I say, no, after the EMDR session, processing may continue. Notice new insights, thoughts, memories. Your dreams may be more active. So if you have any nightmares or any kind of weird dreams, it's absolutely normal. Nothing's wrong with you.
We didn't break you.
Expected. Right. Once we start EMDR, there's no shutting it off. Your brain naturally wants to heal. And so it is going to grab onto the adaptive information that you have available in order to make sense and file this where it belongs, which is in the past. That is why when you recall the memory, it no longer carries the charge because it happened already. You're right now, right here, you are safe. You are okay. And once that kind of that happens for you, then recalling that memory is like,
it's not painful anymore.
that's it.
It's not painful anymore. So is everybody, can everybody get value from EMDR? Or are there some people who are resistant to it? What are the studies shown?
Sure. So EMDR is not going to be for everyone, just like CBT is not for everyone, just like IFS is not for everyone. All right. So I think that there are some people that definitely have protective factors that really make it where they don't find it helpful, and that's okay, right? Because I'm very careful, obviously, about saying, well, if you can't get benefit from EMDR, then you're a lost cause. No, there's a reason there's a multitude of therapeutic modalities, is because it's not a one size fits all. Now with EMDR, it really depends on what we're working on. So if someone's coming in to me and they have a recent incident, right, that happened, maybe a month ago, and they're really struggling with the nightmares or really on edge, right? EMDR is done in a very titrated way that doesn't really allow for free association, which means like pulling from past experiences that kind of get booked together, if you will. And so the goal in those sessions is really just to help get the distress level down, right? Enough for this person to be able to go back to work and function. But to really get a comprehensive treatment, you really want to stick to the standard protocol that allows for the free association, being able to, and sometimes when you're doing the treatment plan there, you're really starting from your first memory of having this maybe negative cognition or this body sensation, and working our way from there on. At least that's how I do it. The EMDR therapists have very different ways of picking targets, so my way is not the only way.
And what how would this work in conjunction with a psychotropic or an SSRI? Because what I know, and please forgive me for my ignorance, is an SSRI will dull the amygdala so you're not as impulsive. And that's why, so for me, if I would have gone through EMDR sooner, maybe it wouldn't have worked, but let's say I did, and it wouldn't allow me to get as anxious about a memory Maybe I wouldn't be as impulsive to fly off the handle because I'm in a much more calm state. So I might not have needed the SSRI.
Right. So the only medication EMDR therapists really ask for clients not to be on are benzos. All the other ones, it's okay, right? There's nothing that says you can't be on it, but it's really the benzos, the Xanax, for example, that we try to steer away from doing EMDR with clients on that medication. The other piece is there's a preparation phase to EMDR, right? Sometimes we go in and we're like, okay, we're going to just do the eye movements right away. And we, as EMDR therapists, we want to make sure that this person sitting in front of us has enough capacity in their nervous system, has the ability to regulate if something comes up, that they're not going to be overwhelmed. So we talk about the window of tolerance, right? Which is how much pain, emotional pain, can you tolerate before you go into fight or flight or complete shutdown and like zone out and dissociate.
Do you want me to answer that? Because I think I've been there. I think I've met that threshold.
Right. Well, sure. I think we've all have, right? If we're human. So if I have someone who has years and years and years of trauma, right, especially early on, that window of tolerance is so narrow that it really does not take much for that system to be overwhelmed and go into complete fight or flight or shutdown, right? So now my job is to help you increase that window of tolerance. So a lot of preparation, a lot of resources where we help this person dip their toe into some painful material that's digestible and then come out of it and regulate.
You put sandbags over the feet too? I've heard of that one.
Right. Well, it helps to ground, right? That's what. But I mean, I have weighted blankets, for example, at my office.
Oh, by the way, weighted blankets are the best thing known to man.
Yeah,
they are fantastic.
Absolutely.
Not real good in the summer because they're hot as hell.
Yeah.
But man, it is just like on a cold winter day, you put the weighted blanket on there and you just fall asleep.
Yeah, it's very relaxing.
Oh,
yeah.
It's the greatest thing.
So I have
ever.
weighted blankets. I have this is funny because, my first responders kind of look at me like, really? It's like a stuffed animal, but it's weighted, right? So I'll just like, all right, put this up. Or like, really? The sloth thing that's very childlike, but like, it's just weighted. Try it out. Right. I have scents, right? Sometimes the best way to ground someone is through their olfactory. It brings them right back. So I have essential oils in my office just in case someone gets overwhelmed, and so there's a lot of things, but ultimately we're helping this person have a much more flexible nervous system before we dive into the processing piece.
Because with a police officer, they're going to deflect as much pain as they can. If they feel the pain bubbling up, they're going to, like me. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, I'll tell you something I did in Anastasia's office. She has a pillow that's Sigmund Freud.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, does this pillow come with a free bag of cocaine? Right? Because I was starting to feel uncomfortable.
Yep.
So that was my attempt at making everybody laugh and
to in some ways regulate.
Yeah.
Right. That's your own internal regulation.
But it was also it's also very detrimental.
Yeah.
So to me, it took me a long time to figure this out. To me, it's detrimental because all it did was make me avoid having to feel the pain that I was feeling in that particular moment. Well, let me deflect it over here. I'll make a little joke and we'll forget about it.
Yeah.
And so nothing gets accomplished. But
Right.
that's too bad.
Yeah.
With police officers specifically,
Mm-hmm.
what can EMDR, because remember, you're not getting your year 1 through 5 police officer. You're getting your year 10 through 20.
Sure.
What benefit can EMDR give to them?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I think processing the traumas that they've already been exposed to, right? So
The years of trauma.
right? So oftentimes I ask, like, are there any calls or anything like that kind of still stick out for you, that kind of continue to replay? And when they replay, there's some sort of something happens in your body, right? Something changes, right? As they enter therapy, then it becomes I just had this call. It bothered me. Can we process it? Right. And now we're just being more proactive about it rather than waiting until it really turns into something else and it's really eating at you. We're being much more proactive about, okay, let's do some EMDR on this recent event that you experienced. And now I'm having that experience of like, oh, now when I think about it, it's not affecting me as much.
The best way to put it with them is, what do you do when your duty rig is getting a little tight? Well, you lose some weight because you don't want to go buy a new duty rig.
Exactly.
It's that maintenance. When your car needs a tune-up, you take it in for a tune-up. You don't take it in when the wheel falls off.
Right. And I mean, look, first responders are like professional overriders, right? What that means is they, because of the job that they do and the training that they receive, they have learned to ignore every survival instinct known, right? Because
you have to. That's the way you got to do your job.
That's how you do your job, right? Everyone else is running the other way. I have to run towards. And you're built just like us other lay people, right? You have a nervous system and it's activated. You've just learned to ignore the activation and to override it, right? But that still gets stuck. And then what happens is you're overriding it when you're not on the job. And there's only so much that a human body can and a human brain can do of that. So I think being able to reflect on what happened during this shift and that was messed up and embrace whatever feelings come up leaves you in a much better place than just kind of ignore that it's even a thing.
I've theorized for years that we as humans we're born with this ability to hold trauma and hold pain, and we're given a glass. Okay, picture it like a glass of water, and each new pain, a little bit of water gets put in there. The problem is you never know how big that glass is,
right?
And one day, if you don't learn how to proactively empty that glass from time to time, it's going to spill over. For me, my glass spilled over. Right. I mean, it was all over the table. But I have talked about you just got to find ways to empty the glass. Through EMDR, it's a way to empty the glass.
Sure.
And it allows you to stay in the job, a job that you love. Right. I mean, think about every administrator and every police. See, this should be required. I'm telling you now, like I have a very firm belief. This should be required for all officers from time to time to go in there and get that proactive mental tune-up with somebody who they can trust, not workers' comp, not any of that garbage, because an administrator, hear me out on this, administrators. You hire a police officer, you invest all this money in training him, you invest him putting him out on the road, you trust him putting out on the road, and what you want is that officer to finish their career. Mm-hmm. If you do not do this proactive maintenance, the likelihood of that, as the years go on, the statistics just lower and lower and lower and lower.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality too is, you talked about the glass, right? And the glass, the height of the glass really depends on, I believe, your childhood experiences. That is the foundation, right? And if the message you heard from your parents was stop crying, cut it out. Oh, you're crying? Go to your room, right? You have learned that having emotions, certain emotions, is inappropriate and unacceptable. And so you're left alone to deal with those emotions, and not in the best way because you're a kid, right? But if you have parents that are able to sit with that emotion without having their own stuff get triggered, right? Then that glass increases because your capacity for sitting with pain, with sadness and anger and all of those other vulnerable emotions, right, gets bigger because your parents have been like, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, this sucks. Absolutely. But I'm here for you. And we're going to figure this out together, right? And now you see a big window of tolerance, much less susceptible to trauma.
You brought up a really good point, because I've seen a lot of guys who were involved in shooting, girls too, and the ones who made it back to work, which is the goal, you know, after shooting, to get back to work. The ones who did make it back to work were the ones, when you asked them about their childhood, it was a great childhood. And like, honestly, not just brushing it over. They grew up in a strong, supportive household, encouraging household, never were hit, never were assaulted or molested. Those are the ones that have the greatest chance of making it back and having short-term difficulties because of their trauma.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
They have adaptive information, right? Like EMDR is the basis of EMDR is this idea of adaptive information processing, right? The idea is our brain wants to naturally heal. And if we have adaptive information from our prior experiences, we pull from that in order to make sense of our current experience. But if we don't have much adaptive information to pull from, then we pull from the maladaptive stuff, like, you know, the cognitions that we develop as children, the I'm weak, right? And this is why I'm struggling with this, because I'm weak, or I'm just inherently bad, or I'm unlovable, right? All of that stuff starts to creep in, and then you're paralyzed by it, right? And so absolutely, if they have a good childhood, and we're not talking about perfect parents, that doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist, yeah.
All right. But attuned enough, right? Parents that were attuned enough to know something's up with you, and I'm not going to ignore it. And it's okay for you to be upset. Let's talk about it, right? Yeah, those are the individuals that have a better chance of, you know, returning.
So is EMDR, is it evolving? Is it growing? Is there new studies, new methods being put into play, or is it pretty much set in stone? What is capable?
Yeah, I think there's always evolving. I mean, I'm, you know, in the literature, there's always new scripts, right? So, and they're looking at EMDR and how to treat OCD now, all kinds of issues. They're looking at EMDR as
I
a
gotta
way
go
to.
back for more EMDR now, because I'm horrible OCD. So now I gotta go back for that. That's great. That's great.
But yeah, there's you know, lots of scripts that practitioners use to treat specific issues. But really, I'm kind of more of that person that I stick to the standard protocol, because that is the gold standard.
But I like the fact that I know it works.
Yeah.
I know it works. And something that works, you want to try to maximize its capabilities. And the way you do that is to constantly work the process. Yeah. You know, we built a car in early 1900s that got 2 miles to the gallon. Well, now we have cars that get 30 miles to the gallon. We constantly try to work that process to make it better. And I think doing that with something that is proven to work can do nothing but benefit us.
Right.
So now we are coming to the end of this thing. Where can our audience find you?
So you can visit my website. It's www.frontlinecounselingcenter.com. And right on the website, there's a booking button that they can click and book a free consultation. So there's me. I have 2 other clinicians on my staff. Chris, who is a retired police officer. And then I have Samantha, who treats adolescents and couples.
Wow. You're just making a one-stop. You're just making the Walmart of therapy. I get it. You're just one-stop shopping. But I know this from people who have seen you, people I've sent your way. I can say wholeheartedly that, number one, your heart's in the right place, which is super important. Number 2, you understand the world of first responders, obviously, because of who you're married to. But there are only a handful of people who I feel comfortable enough personally recommending and putting my name on and say, hey, please see this person. They know what they're doing. And you're definitely one of them. And you have been for years now.
I appreciate it.
And I want you to continue. Just anytime you need a little bit of realignment, a little bit of motivation or inspiration, I'll be there. I'll be right there to hype you up. I'll be your Flavor Flav of therapy.
I appreciate that.
So the way I always end these, the way I have been doing this from the start is there's this process. There's this suffering that you had to go through in order to find EMDR, in order to find your path in life. And there's been some pitfalls and there's been some suffering along the way. But throughout that suffering and those pitfalls, you've had to learn from it, because otherwise it's a wasted opportunity. So with EMDR specifically, and the suffering you had to go through or witness or bear witness to, what do you think it's taught you?
For me, it's just how resilient people can be, right? Like, don't count yourself out. Don't count yourself out. Even when you feel like that pit is larger than you can climb. I know plenty of therapists that will find a ladder big enough, but I will hold out the hope until you can have that for yourself. But we're incredibly resilient, and we want nothing more but to heal. Like, that is our birthright. And so that's really what it's taught me is you'll surprise yourself if you bet on yourself.
I can't thank you enough for being a friend and being somebody who's taken charge of this. I appreciate you coming in here tonight, and
thank you for having me.
I can't wait to send more people. Actually, no, I don't want to send more people. That means more people are getting screwed up. No, I will always recommend you. Always, always, always. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast, the suffering of EMDR. And as always, let's think about all the stuff that we learned. Therapy should never be routine. Don't hide the pain. Our brains need defragmenting from time to time. One size does not fit all, but most importantly, don't count yourself out. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com, put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount on your digital business card. Follow us on all social media. That's Instagram, Facebook, Clapper, LinkedIn, OnlyFans. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson, and of course, follow the Suffering Podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode.